All right, class, it's time to do chapter 9. In chapter 8, we talked about that they had the special constitutional convention. They came together, they scrapped the Articles of Confederation, and they created a brand new constitution. Remember, it was all a secret, so nobody outside of the room knew that they had done this, that they had made it a brand new constitution, scrapped the Articles of Confederation, and basically created a brand new federal government. Nobody knew that, but now that it's out and they know that, they have to send this constitution that they've written out to all 13 states and get approval. And remember, it has to be ratified or approved by 9 out of 13 states, which is 3/4 of the states. Okay, so at this point, now it goes to the states. They have to have their special conventions, and 9 of the 13 states have to approve the Constitution in order for it to actually become law. All right, so let's start with that. Chapter 9. It's called The States Ratify. And if you look at the big question, it says, why was it considered essential to have a Bill of Rights added to the U.S. Constitution? And if you remember from Chapter 8, they didn't put a Bill of Rights on it because they figured, hey, everybody, we already know it. The bill, our inalienable rights, they're already listed in the state constitutions. So why reiterate it in the federal constitutions, in the Constitution itself? So anyway, but now it becomes a big deal. So let's read through this. On page 68, it says, the final test. Now came the final test. Would the people approve what the Constitutional Convention had created? It was time to find out. Within days of the convention, newspapers throughout the country printed the entire Constitution. All Americans, no matter where they lived, were given the opportunity to read every line of the document. They discussed it, analyzed it, and argued about it. Okay, so it's not a secret. Some governments, they create how their government is going to be, and they don't tell the people exactly, and they don't make it public. Not here in the United States. You can go read the Constitution yourself. It had been amazing enough to have delegates come together to write a new Constitution. It was even more amazing to see people, we the people, remember that's in the preamble, having a say about their own futures and the future of their country. It quickly became clear that some Americans wanted the Constitution very much, while others didn't want it at all. Those who wanted to approve it came to be called the Federalists. Okay, remember the federal government is the central government, so Federalist means people who are for a federal government, a central government that has power. Those who opposed it became known as Anti-Federalists. Anti means not, or the opposite, or doesn't like, right? So if you are an Anti-Federalist, you don't want a federal government. Okay, anyway, so let's go on to page 69. There's a lovely picture, and it has taken many months of hard work, but the delegates were able to sign a new Constitution for the United States. Now, all Americans were given a chance to read this historic document. So obviously, there they are, all the people who signed the Constitution. Okay. So we are on page 70, and so far we have found out that there are Federalists, people who support the Constitution, and Anti-Federalists, people who don't like the Constitution and they don't want to ratify or accept it, right? All right, so let's keep reading. Page 70, both sides used newspapers to present their cases to the public. Anti-Federalists had 3 main arguments. So these are the people who don't want the Constitution. They don't want to ratify it. They don't want to approve it. And their three problems were this. First, they said that the Constitutional Convention was only supposed to recommend changes to the Articles of Confederation. What business did the delegates have throwing out the articles? They had gone way beyond what they were supposed to do. And remember, originally, they were all invited to amend the Articles of Confederation, not toss them out. So they were like, hey, that wasn't what you were supposed to do. Second, Anti-Federalists argued that the convention had created a much too powerful central government. And had they learned nothing from all those years of strong central government in Great Britain? So these guys also said, wait. Now you've given our central government too much power. Didn't you guys learn about what happened with Britain? Really? Leave it to the states. Forget this federal government. That was their second thing they didn't like. And third, they complained that the convention had failed to include a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, which it did. The Anti-Federalists warned that the national government was a direct threat to the liberties of the people. State constitutions had provisions protecting people's rights from the state governments. The national constitution needed provisions protecting people's rights from the new national government. So they had a point. They said, yes, our state governments, they do have these rights listed in them, and it protects it from the state government. But now you created this federal government, and our rights are not listed there, and you don't have it listed from our federal point of view. So they were kind of miffed about that. So the plan of the, continuing on page 7 in the middle, the plan of the Anti-Federalists was delay. They tried to get the states to put off calling a ratifying convention. They also tried to get the states and the Congress to call for another national convention to fix the problems to the Constitution first. There would be plenty of time, they said, to have ratifying conventions after that. So basically they were like putting things off, trying to procrastinate, saying, let's not have that state convention to ratify this just yet. In fact, you know what? Let's get everybody back together and let's fix the Constitution first, and then we'll ratify it. They were just kind of like dragging their feet, right? The Federalists, however, these are the guys who want the Constitution to be ratified and accepted and to go into effect. The Federalists wanted to get the Constitution ratified quickly in states where there was strong support and to put off votes in states where there was strong opposition. They hoped support for the Constitution would grow as the early states ratified it. Among the leading supporters on the Federalist side were Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Again, both of those guys were James Madison was at the convention, and he was the one who actually wanted originally to get rid of the Articles of Confederation, right? These two, plus John Jay from New York, wrote 85 separate newspaper articles. These guys were busy writing. On page 71, it says, in which they discussed every part, practically every sentence of the new Constitution. They explained to the American people why each part was important. They explained how the new government would work. They also explained why the Articles of Confederation needed to be replaced. These essays became known as the Federalist Papers. So these three guys, Alexander Hamilton, right? Yeah, Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay had basically writing articles in the press. And they're telling everybody, explaining sentence by sentence what the Constitution says and what it means, and also explaining why the Articles of Confederation needed to be replaced because they were so bad and they didn't give a federal government that could do anything. And that you needed something like that in order to keep our government going, right? Anyway, so these little articles that they wrote for the newspapers became known as the Federalist Papers. Continuing on page 71, it's the struggle for ratification. So you'll remember that each state was to hold a special ratifying convention. It would take a yes vote in 9 states to put the new Constitution into effect. So that was one of the things the Constitution said. In order for something to be ratified, it had 3/4 of the states had to be accepting of it, right? So on page 72, Delaware held the first convention, and it voted yes. Okay, there's one state. Pennsylvania and New Jersey soon followed, 2 more states. Remember, got to have 9. That made the score 3 for yes and 0 for no. Yes votes in Georgia and Connecticut in January 1788 made it 5 states. Federalists were pleased by this good start, but they knew that the hardest battle lay ahead. One of these battles was sure to take place in Massachusetts, where the Anti-Federalists were very strong. In Massachusetts' ratifying convention, Anti-Federalists fiercely attacked the new Constitution. Here's how one delegate expressed his fears and distrust of it. So this is from the words on this little scroll here. These are actually words that one of the Anti-Federalists said, and these were his fears and the reason why he didn't want to have the Constitution accepted. He said, "We fought against Great Britain. Some said for a 3-penny tax on tea." Remember the whole tea thing and tax? But it was not that. It was because they claimed a right to tax us and to bind us in all cases whatever. And does not this Constitution do the same? Does it not take away all we have, all our property? Does it not lay or impose all taxes? So he's saying, we just got done fighting a war with Britain about this. Doesn't this Constitution do all those same things? Now, Other opponents jumped on the absence of Bill of Rights. So there's more anti-federalists who are like, not only that, but there's no Bill of Rights on this thing in the new Constitution. And without a Bill of Rights, they said, the liberties of the people would not be safe. For a time, anti-federalist strategies seemed to be working in Massachusetts. Then the Federalists hit upon a neat strategy of their own. Instead, on page 73, of trying to explain why no Bill of Rights was needed, they decided to compromise with the anti-federalists. Remember compromise? You give, we all come up somewhere in between. If you join us in ratifying the Constitution, they said, we promise to support a Bill of Rights. What? The offer won over enough anti-federalists to swing the Massachusetts ratifying convention in favor of the Constitution. So with Massachusetts, now we got 6. 6 down, 3 to go in order to make this work, said the Federalists. Then Maryland voted yes in April, so 7. And South Carolina voted yes in May, 8. Making 8 states in favor of the new Constitution. 8. Just 1 more to go. New Hampshire was the next state to have a ratifying convention. If New Hampshire said yes, the Constitution would go into effect. No problem. The only problem was that the 2 of the biggest and most important states, Virginia and New York, were not among those 9 states. Without at least one of those 2 states, the new nation would be very, very shaky. And remember, Virginia and New York, these are the biggest states that have the most population. And even if they were to get all 9 states and Virginia and New York were not part of that, then you've got these 2 large states who are like, yeah, we didn't accept that. And they're going to probably get mad and things could go wrong and blah, 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 right? So it's going to be a shaky federal government if they don't get Virginia and New York on this. So, even though New Hampshire voted yes in June, making it the 9 that they needed, supporters of the Constitution could not breathe easily. Their eyes turned to Virginia. There, the battle between Federalists and Anti-Federalists raged for nearly a month. Patrick Henry was among the leading Anti-Federalists. Remember, Patrick Henry was the guy who didn't go to the convention, the Constitutional Convention, because he said, I smell a rat. He thought they were going to do something besides amend the Articles of Confederation. And what did they do? They did. They tossed him out. And so he's like, hey, yeah, exactly. You did what I thought you were going to do. And I don't like that. And he didn't want the new Constitution. So he's the biggest anti-federalist there. He could still win over listeners with his fiery speeches. Remember, he's the give me liberty or give me death, guy who proponent who helped get us going into the American Revolution, right? And James Madison, though, was also from Virginia. James Madison was among the leading Federalists. He's the main one who got the whole Constitution ball rolling, right? He could win over listeners with his calm and brilliant explanation of the Constitution. So on one hand, in the Anti-Federalists, you got Patrick Henry, who's all blah, 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 blah. And he's loud and boisterous, and people listen to him because of the way he talks and speaks. It's entertaining and draws you in. Whereas James Madison is very logical, and he explains the benefits of the Constitution in a logical manner to people and helps them understand it that way. So 2 opposing forces here. Who's going to win? Oh, I don't know. And then there was Edmund Randolph. And if you remember Edmund Randolph, he was the one who proposed the Virginia Plan, which eventually became the Constitution. But when it came time to sign the Constitution, he was like, yeah, I don't like this plan anymore. I don't like it. So you would think he wanted the Constitution, and then he didn't want the Constitution, and now let's see what he does. Yeah, you remember him, the man who proposed the Virginia Plan, but then refused to sign the Constitution? Randolph had changed his mind once again, and he's now in favor of the Constitution. He's like, hey, maybe I should have signed that thing when it came out. Anyway, so page 74. As in Massachusetts and several other states, Anti-Federalists in Virginia pointed out the absence of the Bill of Rights. Patrick Henry led the charge. Without a Bill of Rights, roared Henry, our liberty, the greatest of all earthly blessings, is in danger. The Federalists, however, had an answer for that. Just as they had in Massachusetts, vote for the Constitution now, they told the Anti-Federalists, and we will work with you to add the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. No, said the Anti-Federalists, first call a new constitutional convention and add a Bill of Rights, and then we'll vote. Amend first, said the Anti-Federalists, and amend later, said the Federalists. So now we've got this whole thing of do it now or do it later, okay? On the day of the vote, Madison promised that once the Constitution took effect, once it was ratified and accepted by all the states, he personally would lead the fight to amend it with a Bill of Rights. That seemed to do the trick, because he's the guy who came up with this Constitution. If he's agreeing to make sure it's a priority, okay, that does the trick, apparently, because by a narrow margin, Virginia voted yes, and the Constitution was ratified and accepted in Virginia. So now we have 10 of the 13 states, right? So Madison, true to his word, we're doing Bill of Rights on page 74. Madison was true to his word. He was elected to the House of Representatives in the new government, and he set to work putting together the Bill of Rights. He introduced his proposed amendments in June 1789. After debate in the House and the Senate, most of them were adopted and sent to the states for their approval. Remember, amending the Constitution requires two-thirds, there we go, majority in each House of Congress, so in the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the approval of 3/4 of the states, which at that time was 9 of the 13 states. In 1791, 10 of these amendments were ratified by the states, meaning they were accepted by the states, and added to the Constitution. These first 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights. If you look on page 74, this is a copy. It says the Bill of Rights outline the rights of the people. And obviously, I can't read that right now because it's all tiny, tiny script, and you can't read that. But basically, on page 75, it says what some of these rights are. So the Bill of Rights say to the national government, these are the basic rights of the people. You cannot take them away. It's not allowed. One of those amendments says that Congress may not make any law that interferes with your freedom of speech or your freedom of religion. So those are two of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, or two of the rights in the Bill of Rights. First two amendments: freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Continuing on page 76. It cannot take away the press's freedom to print what it wishes. So again, the freedom of the press. It cannot prevent people from assembling peaceably or from asking the government to do something about their complaints. Another of those first 10 amendments protects you against the government illegally entering and searching your house. Sound familiar? It should. Many of these are the same rights of Englishmen over which the Revolutionary War was fought. So these were some of the very same things we fought over the war about, was because England had basically said, no, you can't do these, or we're going to squash these things or whatever. So 4 other amendments make sure that people accused of crime get a fair trial. Taken together, those first 10 amendments to the Constitution are the most important protectors of our liberty that we have. They support the principles of limited government. So again, that was the whole point. We create this big federal government, but it has to have some limiting powers because the people are the ones who are in charge. We don't need somebody telling us or making us do certain things. We have inalienable rights. But, that's page 76, we are getting ahead of the story. After Virginia approved the Constitution, it was clear that the struggle for ratification had been won. Obviously, 10 states now have agreed to ratify and accept the Constitution. Meanwhile, in New York, the state's ratifying convention was meeting. At the start, the Anti-Federalists had a 3-1 advantage over the Federalists, meaning they were not going to ratify this Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, who had represented New York at the Constitutional Convention, was very worried about this. However, as soon as Virginia's convention voted yes, a messenger raced to New York with the news. He arrived there in early July. The news he brought had an almost immediate effect. With Virginia voting yes, New York realized that the new Constitution would definitely go into effect, whether they voted yes or no. They decided it would not be wise to be left out of the new nation. By the end of July, New York voted yes, but by only 3 votes. So now we have 11, I don't have enough fingers, 11 states. 2 states, North Carolina and Rhode Island, were still holding out, but they could wait. The Constitution, drawn up that summer in Philadelphia, was now officially the Constitution of the United States. It was time for the nation to celebrate. And did it ever, with bonfires, ringing church bells, and parades in cities and towns throughout the land. No celebration was grander than the one in the nation's largest city, Philadelphia, because at the time, Philadelphia was the largest city. There, the citizens chose to celebrate their nation's new beginning on Independence Day, the 4th of July. So they celebrated this Constitution getting ratified on July 4th, which was the day that we declared independence, which is our Independence Day. At dawn, church bells and booming cannons from the ship Rising Sun in the harbor announced the start of the celebration. Later that morning, a 1.5-mile long parade set off through the city. Floats, marching bands, and ordinary citizens offered their welcome to the nation's new beginning. Following that came an afternoon of speeches and picnicking. Nearly half the entire population of Philadelphia turned out for this huge party. At the end of the day, one leading citizen of the city said, "Now it is done. Now we are a nation." Indeed, we were. Okay? And of course, there's a picture there of everybody, people now, not then. Those are kids nowadays, celebrating the 4th of July, which is not only our Independence Day, but kind of like the day that we got our new federal government with the Constitution. That concludes chapter 8's reading. So you should now be able to go and answer the questions for chapter 8. If you have any questions, join me at my meet time from 1 to 3, Monday through Thursday, or you can always message me in the Google Hangouts or emails or whatever, or, yeah. So I will be happy to help you with any of those questions and get your work done. See ya.